Hi, good day. My name is Anton Sevilla-Liu from Kyushu University in Japan, and I'm going to be introducing my clinical pedagogy team. So basically, this is a video for those who might be interested in the kind of research that I do and the kind of research my team does, and perhaps even joining that team. So in order to get a bit of an overview about that, my team does a lot of things, so it can be a little bit confusing. So what I'll do is I'll explain the background of myself and my team, and then the kind of field we operate in, our basic approach to education, the facets of our research, how to make sense of the many facets of our research, and then actual research focus themes. Yeah. And then try to explain the people behind the team. So tell you about the kind of research I do, tell you about the kind of research that each individual team member does. And then at the end, if you're interested, there's some stuff for potential applicants. Okay, so in the background of myself, my own research, and my team is of course those who taught me and my academic background. So I started in the Philippines at the Ateneo de Manila University. I was studying Heidegger philosophy under Professor Raymond Barbaza, and I was also until my master's doing work between Heidegger and the Kyoto School of Philosophy. Then in I think 2011 I moved to Kyoto, and I studied under Buddhist philosopher Sueki Fumiko Sensei, and I was mainly focused on Watsuji Tetsuro, especially the Buddhist side of Watsuji Tetsuro's ethics. And then at the same time, I was studying at Kobe University with Kazashi Nobuo Sensei, under whom I learned really the rest of Japanese philosophy, particularly the Kyoto School. And then I was also studying in Kyoto University, this time under two professors, Saito Naoko Sensei and Nishihira Tadashi Sensei. Both of them are in a field called clinical pedagogy. And so it's actually through these two professors at Kyoto University that I slowly moved from pure philosophy to education. And so I just mentioned the name of the field, clinical pedagogy, and I imagine in English, I imagine nobody knows what clinical pedagogy is. Pedagogy. I never quite know how to say it. Anyway, so just a very, very quick overview. The clinical pedagogy is part of the bigger field of educational studies. But usually when you talk about educational studies, the focus is on the normal development of your average healthy child and how you support that, which is of course well and good. But if you look at the at the graph, the axis of this graph, on one hand, there's the conscious, healthy, normal side of education, but also, everyone, every student, every child, every teacher even, goes through various challenges, goes through various crises. There's a part of our life that is not conscious and clear, but is in the dark, is unconscious. And, also at the same time, this part of education is about helping people. But we can't just, help people without really understanding how they are. So this is more observational side of it. And so clinical pedagogy is really about trying to stretch in these four directions. So on one hand, if you look at the bottom part, it connects to this field. It's easier to explain in German, Pädagogische Anthropologie, philosophical anthropology of education, basically philosophy of education and some related human sciences. So that's a very strong influence when looking at, where is the human being going. But at the same time, it starts to connect. If you look at the unconscious crisis side on top, it starts to connect to clinical psychology. And then if you look at the more, not just, try to help people, but actually understanding the people you're helping, then that'll move us closer to personality psychology. So basically, clinical pedagogy is within educational studies, but it connects to philosophy, to clinical psychology and personality psychology, and also includes within it educational counseling, especially the non-pathological forms. So that's the field. clinical pedagogy. All right, now with this sort of an integrated field, I think you're also starting to see that the approach to education is not exactly normal. Um, most, every approach to a particular field has a particular presupposition as to what education is and as to what the human being is. And so the particular approach that drives us and is actually an important part of clinical pedagogy in Japan as a whole is the philosophy of education of Mori Akira, the person on the right. Mori Akira is a member of the Kyoto School of Philosophy. He's technically a second generation member, student of Tanabe Hajime, and he brought the philosophy of the Kyoto School to the field of education. He was one of the, together with Kimura Motomori. And basically his view of education is a very simple way to summarize it is education is anything that has to do with our becoming human, or our human becoming, depends on how you want to put that phrase. So usually when we think about education, some people can have a very narrow view of it. So they think of it mainly as the transmission of culturally relevant information, which is important. That's very well and good. And together with that, usually they include learning to integrate, to socialize the student, yeah? So social formation. Now these two are very important facets, but even before we learn to, become part of our culture, there's our natural life as children, learning to come to grips with our basic experience of reality, learning to have this spontaneous ability to respond to our environment and so on. So you have this natural growth. And if you miss that, you get a very, very dry, neutered kind of education. And at the same time, of course, there's this spontaneous side of us, there's this socialized side of us, but there's also a part of us that's trying to come to terms with ourselves, with, trying to organize, the values that we learn from society and try to make sense of where we're taking our lives, and also ultimately how we're going to face our deaths. So we call this, personal awakening. And so when Mori Akira talks about education as human becoming, or as the process of becoming human, he's talking about this broad view of education that includes growth, transmission, formation, and awakening. And at the background of this is a particular view of the human being. So usually we think of the human being as Homo sapiens. We really focus on the fact that human beings think, which is all well and good. But that's just one facet of the human beings. So what he has is a three-layered view of the human being. On one hand, there's a part of human beings that relates directly with the environment, the same as animals. And our spontaneity, our vital energy is very much tied to this. So that's a very important part. We have to remember that even humans are animals. But at the same time, we're not just dealing with the environment directly and problem solving directly, while that's important, but we also use various tools, including physical tools is also our cognitive tools. So using ideas, using concepts, using logic in order to relate with the problems outside us better. And so that is part of the conscious layer, and this is where all of the transmission and social formation becomes so important, learning how to use our symbolic world. And so we relate with the world both directly and indirectly, but it doesn't end there. So we don't just relate with the world, but we also relate with ourselves. We also try to make sense of ourselves, identity, using concepts to look at yourself, but also looking at yourself more directly beyond concepts. Our own existential self-relation, so to speak. And that's a third layer called the self-aware layer. So behind these four facets of education, this expanded view of education is a holistic view of the human being as organic, conscious, and self-aware, relating with the world directly, indirectly, but also relating with itself and trying to respond to all three layers in a more holistic way. Okay, so this is the presupposition of how our team operates, how I do research, and it will inform what you'll see in the next slides. Okay, so with this basic idea of education for becoming human, we have three main parts. So thinking, the doing, and the observing. Now, as you saw from my background, my academic background, which in a sense informs the whole team, I spent a lot of time in philosophy. So theory and thinking are very, very important for me. So there are, of course, various ideas about education, John Dewey, and so on. And then there's also my training in pure philosophy, the Kyoto School of Philosophy and Existentialism. I do that as a part of my, what do you call this, my field of specialization. And then also, of course, philosophy and this critical dealing with concepts is very important, but they're not the only ones who come up with concepts for understanding human beings. So very important for me is what they call the personological tradition in psychology. And that's also a very big part of our theoretical side. So we do a lot of this theoretical research, understanding the concepts, seeing how they connect to each other, seeing how they are in history. But concepts, just concepts, I don't think if we're really trying to transform reality, a lot of times that's not enough. And so what are we going to do with our concepts? And so here we get to the praxis side. And given the Moriyaku background, there are particular facets of praxis that we focus on. One is the educative relationship, kind of relationship you had between teacher and student, but also, it's not just school, so even between parent and child and so on. And then student guidance and counseling, how you talk to your students both inside and outside class. And then one particular specific focus that we have is mindful education. It's also called contemplative pedagogy, but basically, really bringing this deeper layer of self-awareness into education. And also self-education, how we form ourselves is a very important part. So through these practices, we bring the theory, we bring the understanding into direct relationship with various educational phenomena. But that's not a one-way movement. So, when we do these things, when we relate with students, like for instance, with certain ideas, certain philosophies in mind, there are a lot of times we start to question, are these ideas really good ideas, So we need a feedback, we need a feedback direction, and this is where the observation comes in. And since we're trying to look at the human being in a holistic way, and we're really looking at deeper facets of consciousness, the particular methods we use are usually qualitative, and one of them is narrative analysis, when we look at how people pull together their experiences through stories, and the other one is phenomenological experiences, where we look at the minutiae of particular experiences. So this is, these three facets, these four, what for me is a very productive cycle of understanding and working on educational realities. But of course, not everyone can do all of these. I do, but most of the members of the team will work on particular parts, as you'll see later on. Okay, so that's the big picture, and the particular research topics that are at the forefront now, these tend to change, but right now, so we're looking at the Kyoto School of Education's global contribution to education for self-awareness. This is actually a JSPS proposal, and then we're also doing research on narrative identity, the stories we tell about ourselves, and reauthoring in educational contexts, so how our stories are formed and transformed in our educative relationships. And then third, really looking deep into how do we relate with ourselves, so a phenomenology of self-relationality. And that's not just phenomenology, but that's actually connecting a lot to case formulation in psychotherapy. So we look at acceptance and commitment therapy, and we also look at self-compassion. But we're not doing these in a pathological clinical psychology sense, but more of as a counseling theory, educational theory. Okay, so that's the general direction. The previous slides showed the general direction, but actually what makes a team run is people, actual people. And at the forefront of the team is me. So this is the kind of work I do. my work is all over the place, but I hope after having seen those slides you kind of see the logic to the work I do. So these are the main publications I have. So I have a book on the ethicist Watsuji Tetsuro. I have a translation of Sueki Sensei's Buddhist ethics, and I also have work on no mind. It's a Japanese concept of no mind and care. And I have, it's a word cloud of the various publications I have. But if you're interested, please have a look at the website. A lot of them are on the internet. Okay, but it's not just me. Very important in the team is everybody else and how they're able to, support the kind of work that we do. So just very quickly introduce the members. Honda Teruhiko, he does contemplative pedagogy. He actually trained for that in a workshop in the US, and he tries to understand that using psychological flexibility, which is an acceptance commitment therapy concept. So he's combining those two. And then we have Mizukami Atsuko Sensei. She's an associate professor now, and she used to be a principal, yeah, but she does research on the narratives of students, especially young students, and their forming narratives, and also the process of student guidance. And then Catherine Sevilla-Liu, she's a yoga instructor, and she combines yoga, the actual instruction of yoga, with psychological flexibility, which comes from acceptance commitment therapy and training, and also self-compassion. And she also does the philosophical background of that. And then we have what do you call this, a study abroad student from China, Chang Guanjie. Chang-san, she does self-compassion, this time for teachers. And another student from China, Wu Qingyue-san. Wu-san does what do you call this? The various stories we have within our parent-child relationships. Okay, so those are the present members of the team. But we do keep our connection with our graduates. So Yamamoto Genta, he did pure philosophy, Jean-Luc Nancy, and its relationship to education, and he's still doing similar work now at Kyoto University. And then Machio Hao was doing Heidegger and its connection to existential education, so on the pure philosophy side. So as you see, what do you call this? It's very difficult to do all three at once, but what most of the members do is they pick, thinking, doing, observing, they pick one or two, and they focus on that while keeping this whole cycle of thinking, doing, and observing in mind. And they get very good at their particular parts, and they're able to really, I learned so much from the kind of work that they do. So maybe if you're looking at this and you're thinking, hey, I'm kind of interested in being part of this cycle, and being part of how this kind of work, then the next few slides are for you. So if you're interested in joining our team, what can we do as a part of the team? I have a lot of undergraduate classes. Of course, you're free to attend those. And then I have graduate classes. This is really the core, where the cutting edge stuff happens. And even undergraduates can audit that. And then this is a bit of a strict part, but all of the members of the team do weekly or bi-weekly homework on the stuff that they're researching on individually. And so that's really how they brush up their own understanding. And then we also have coding meetings, where we practice our ability to interpret various educational phenomena. We have team presentations. I'm also part of a lot of international associations, so we have these colloquia, which are opportunities to learn and connect, really with people at the forefront of the field. So I'm biased, but I think it's an excellent place to learn high-level skills and really thinking about human existence, but not just abstractly, but actually seeing how that works, and you're connecting deeply with people, and seeing it at play by observing people holistically. So I think that's a good part, but the truth is doing that is very intellectually challenging. So we are, operating across several fields, and you will have to slowly learn a whole lot of things. So that is intellectually challenging. But also we're looking at parts of the human being that maybe many people deliberately don't look at. So it can be challenging emotionally also, and can make some demands on your mental health. So I want to be honest about the difficulty of this research too. So please keeping in mind the difficulty, keeping in mind the rigor and the scope of what we do, but at the same time also, of course, the opportunities that are available, and give it some thought. Okay, so if you're interested, or if you're still interested, the process for application is as follows. So for ISI students, send me an email, discuss what you want to research, and there's a written exam and then a trial period. For those who want to apply as a research student, in order to get to grad school, email me your CV and your research plan. Very important, the research plan. And then there's usually a process of, you have an interview and then 2 written examinations and another interview. And then you can apply through the office as a research student if you pass all those steps. Okay, so that's the basic process, but if you have questions or you have inquiries, please send me an email. Thank you very much for listening.